in the old days. However, however that might be, you see, then the question is, what would be, if he's guilty of impiety, and that would be one of the things that would emerge from the text, how important is piety? Obviously, what comes to the fore in the very beginning of the book is the question, somehow politics and piety are related, and that Socrates has something to do with piety. There's an odor around Socrates of impiety. And you see, it's very complicated for them to come to, because the way, how does this book appear from the first? I think it would appear to most of us at first blush in this context, a very simple one, freedom of speech. I think that's the way it's understood. And everybody says they believe in freedom of speech these days. But then Socrates is a hero of freedom of speech. But then, in the sort of preliminary discussion of this, you'd have to ask in the first place, can you say everything? Is freedom of speech simply unlimited? Would be the first thing. In the second place, you see, since they make Socrates a hero of freedom of speech, if you look at the speech, he doesn't yell for freedom of speech for everyone. So he's not a very good model. He's not like Bruno or John Stuart Mill or Justice Douglas or something like that. So you can tarnish him quite quickly because he's not very explicit. He sort of accepts the authority of the city in these respects, and so he's not completely straightforward. So no longer is he our hero, but we say he should have been put to death because he was investigating dangerous things, but. It's more of an attack on the city than a defense of Socrates. But then you have to raise the question with them, very simply, explicitly. Are there not, or is it simply unreasonable to say that there are some beliefs which must necessarily be held? Are there not truths which are dangerous? You see, they are very far away, from they don't recognize the assumption underlying their own liberalism, that, although plenty of them are willing for the suppression of the speech of racists or whatever, that they don't realize the presupposition that truth is somehow always good in the first place. They don't take the religious question because it's been separated from politics, but the question is whether religion and somehow attachment, political loyalty isn't connected with religion. Or in another respect, you put it this way, Socrates presupposes, or you can say their position presupposes that philosophy is always good. And good for other people, good for politics. And that's very questionable, and you can see that Socrates himself does not accept that position. That Socrates realized, he doesn't say that I should be able to say anything I want, or philosophy is good itself. What he tries to do throughout the book, what's his mode of presentation? To prove that philosophy is useful for the city, that it makes men more virtuous, and so on. That he has to justify it before the tribunal of the city. And that, therefore, the issue is a complicated one, but the powerful way to begin it, he may indeed be guilty. And then, you see, there are many ways from which you can begin this. It's a question of knowledge. The other is, he's guilty of disobedience. Once you raise the question of if he's guilty, then shouldn't he obey the laws? Well, then they raise the question of natural law or natural right immediately from this. But then the question is, can there be a natural law or natural right which guarantees freedom of speech simply, and so on? This is that kind of issue with you from the beginning. I just now another aspect, another thing you can ask What was he trying to do with the apology? Was he trying to get off? When you read the book through, you have enough of a reminiscence of it. Did he really seriously try to get off?
He makes the opposite.
Why does he do that?
Continues what he always did, in a sense. He almost treated him out. It's very insolent.
Yeah.
He's been trying to teach by clarifying the difference between himself and his accusers, even magnifying that difference.
Yeah, then that's certainly not a way to get over it, but isn't that a kind of suicide? Isn't that a questionable thing to do?
Not the love of wisdom, a practice of death.
Yeah, that's true, but learning how to die that doesn't mean to say that one seeks after death. Why should one insult jurors? You can say he's trying to sort of contrast. We'll see between himself and the jurors, perhaps, but or his accusers. But surely it seems that he committed a kind of judicial suicide, and that's very strange and highly questionable. I mean, that means to say that his intention must have been something more. Surely something like a didactic function would have to be understood, a pedagogic function with his own life. The second question of this kind, these are just sort of basic impressions, sort of like to begin with. Was he honest? Does he tell the truth about himself here?
Well, if you don't say that.
Why not? And there's some contradictions, I think you can find out, that it's a pettifogging speech, as we'll see. So what does one think of dishonest? Obviously, simple truth wasn't his only value, I think you'll see. All right. Unless there's something more you want to reflect on this point. To turn to the body of the text itself. And this is a Platonic dialogue, but it ain't a dialogue. It's a speech.
It's called a dialogue.
Yeah. Well, by whom is it called a dialogue?
Oh, sure, this is a conversation. You see the example?
Yeah. You're right. The question is, it doesn't have a dialogue form. This is this is obvious.
Dialogue in the deepest sense.
What?
And that he does what people do when they dialogue with other people. That's himself. His interlocutor.
Yeah, but in this case, he can't get the interlocutor to contradict himself. He can't get the interlocutor to. You remember the distinction he makes. You see, there are two kinds of rhetoric. Rhetoric to an audience, of men, and rhetoric of dialectic, where there's back and forth. And the character of rhetoric of the dialogue is that you can force the man to agree on the basis of his contradictions. You can't do that in a large. And that constitutes something of a problem. I say that this dialogue is clearly sort of the threshold, the portico of Plato. All the dialogue. Somehow or other, every dialogue has to be read in the perspective of this. Socrates was a man who was put to death. He was put to death for philosophizing. And philosophizing got him into trouble somehow with the city. And here he's talking to his accusers. And it's a speech. And this is the only dialogue that isn't a dialogue. There's no, And it shows that, and if dialogue is the method of philosophy, what's the implication of that? That you can't philosophize publicly. But that means to say thereby that there really is a kind of conflict between ordinary politics, because politics, requires the